The first time the lawyers walked into the small roadside café with 4 bodyguards in dark suits, the entire room seemed to stop breathing, but the real shock was on the face of the single father who had been quietly buying breakfast for a poor woman every morning, never imagining that kindness could one day return to him dressed in power, secrets, and consequences. Before the story unfolds any further, pause for a moment. If you believe kindness still matters in a world that often feels cold, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Journal for more real stories about second chances and humanity. Every morning just after sunrise, when the streets were still washed in pale daylight and shopkeepers were pulling open metal shutters, Aarav Malik parked his old motorcycle beside the café. The café was nothing fancy, just chipped wooden tables, a cracked glass counter, and the smell of strong tea that soaked into the air. Aarav was 37, broad-shouldered but tired-looking, with early gray strands in his black hair and eyes that always seemed to be calculating how to stretch a little money into a full day. He worked as a warehouse loader, lifting boxes from dawn to afternoon, his hands rough and permanently marked by dust and rope burns. Life had narrowed after his wife passed away from illness 3 years earlier, leaving him with a 6-year-old son named Kabir and a mountain of responsibilities he never felt fully prepared to carry. Aarav's mornings were carefully timed. He dropped Kabir at school, promised him he would be back before sunset, and stopped at the café for tea and a plain omelette. That was where he noticed the woman for the first time. She sat at the corner table near the window, always during daylight, her posture straight despite the worn shawl around her shoulders. Her name, he would later learn, was Meera. She looked to be in her early 40s, with neatly combed hair tied low at the nape of her neck, and eyes that held a quiet dignity even when her hands trembled slightly as she held her cup. She never asked anyone for help. She simply sat there with a single cup of tea, sometimes for hours, as if warmth itself was enough to keep her going. The cafe owner once muttered that she paid with loose coins and sometimes couldn't pay at all. The second morning Aarav noticed her, he ordered an extra omelette and left it at her table without a word. She looked up, startled, and tried to refuse, but Aarav only nodded once and returned to his seat. From that day on, it became routine. An extra piece of bread, a bowl of lentils, sometimes fruit when he could afford it. It cost him little, yet to him it felt like giving away something precious, because every rupee had already been promised to rent, school fees, or medicine. Aarav never told anyone about Meera. He never spoke to her beyond a polite greeting. He did not know her past, and he did not ask. Perhaps it was because his own life felt fragile, held together by habit and responsibility, and he sensed something similar in her. He only knew that each morning she thanked him with her eyes, and that quiet gratitude felt heavier than words. The struggle in Aarav's life deepened as months passed. The warehouse cut overtime hours, and his income shrank. Kabir fell ill one week, forcing Aarav to miss work and lose pay. There were nights when Aarav lay awake listening to the ceiling fan rattle, wondering if kindness was a luxury he could no longer afford. More than once, he stood at the café counter, counting coins, debating whether to stop buying the extra meal. Each time, he looked at Meera sitting alone in the daylight glow of the window, and something in him refused to turn away. He told himself that if the world had taken so much from him, he would not let it take his humanity too. Meera, for her part, noticed everything. She saw the exhaustion in Aarav's face deepen. She noticed when he skipped his own breakfast some mornings. Once, she gently pushed the plate back toward him, but he smiled and shook his head. In those silent exchanges, a fragile bond formed, built not on conversation but on shared endurance. One morning, the café door opened with unusual force. The bell above it rang sharply, and 4 tall men in crisp suits entered, scanning the room with alert eyes. Behind them walked 2 lawyers carrying leather folders, their expressions formal and controlled. The café owner froze mid-step. Customers lowered their cups. The daylight streaming through the windows suddenly felt harsh. The group walked straight toward Meera's table. Aarav felt his chest tighten. For a brief, terrifying moment, he wondered if she was in trouble, if his quiet kindness had unknowingly entangled him in something dangerous. Meera stood slowly, her hands steady, her face calm in a way Aarav had never seen before. One of the lawyers addressed her with respect, almost reverence, and gestured toward the door. Meera nodded once, then turned her eyes toward Aarav. In that look was gratitude, sorrow, and something else that felt like farewell. Aarav rose from his chair without thinking. His heart pounded as he followed them outside, into the full light of the morning. A black car waited at the curb, polished and imposing. The contrast between it and Meera's worn shawl was almost painful. Before she entered the car, Meera reached into her bag and pressed a folded note into Aarav's hand. Her fingers lingered for a second, as if she wanted to say more but could not. Then she stepped into the car, the door closed, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving behind silence and confusion. For the rest of the day, Aarav worked in a fog. The note remained unopened in his pocket, heavy as stone. That night, after Kabir had fallen asleep, Aarav finally unfolded it under the dim light of the single bulb. Meera had written about loss, betrayal, and survival. Years earlier, she had been the co-founder of a successful textile company. After her husband's sudden death, she had trusted family members to manage her affairs while she grieved. They had stripped her of assets, manipulated documents, and left her with nothing. Legal battles dragged on, draining her resources until she was forced into poverty. The lawyers, she explained, had finally won her case that morning. Everything taken from her was being returned. At the end of the note, she wrote that Aarav's kindness had kept her alive when she had nothing else. That his small, consistent help had reminded her she was still human, still worthy of care. She asked him to forgive her for never explaining, and to believe that goodness never disappears, it only waits. Days passed. Aarav returned to the café each morning, half expecting to see Meera by the window. Her seat remained empty. Life pressed on with its familiar weight. Then one afternoon, while Aarav was at work, a black car arrived at Kabir's school. Panic rose in Aarav's chest when he received the call, but the school assured him everything was fine. When he arrived, he found Meera standing in the courtyard, now dressed simply but neatly, her presence calm and warm in the daylight. She explained everything this time, not with grandeur, but with humility. She told him she had regained her company, but more importantly, she had regained her voice. She had searched for him not to repay him with money, but to offer him opportunity. Meera had established a foundation to support families struggling quietly, like hers once had, and like Aarav still was. She wanted him to manage the foundation's local outreach, to be paid fairly, and to help others with the same dignity he had shown her. Aarav resisted at first. Pride and fear tangled inside him. He was just a warehouse worker, a single father barely managing. Meera reminded him that kindness had already proven he was capable of far more. She did not promise an easy life, only a chance to breathe. Slowly, life changed. Aarav left the warehouse. His days filled with organizing aid, meeting people who reminded him of himself, and returning home before sunset to help Kabir with homework. The café remained part of his routine, but now he paid forward kindness openly, never forgetting where it all began. As this story comes close to its end, if it has touched your heart or reminded you of the quiet power of compassion, please like this video, comment your feelings, share it with someone who needs hope, and stay connected with Kindness Journal. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. Special request, please comment the word kindness below and tell us where you're watching from. On a bright morning months later, Aarav sat at the same cafe window, sunlight warming his face, watching Kabir laugh over a glass of milk. Across the street, Meera spoke with volunteers, her eyes bright but grounded. Aarav realized that kindness had not changed his life overnight. It had changed it slowly, patiently, the way morning light fills a room. And in that gentle daylight, he finally understood that even the smallest act, given without expectation, can one day walk back into your life with 4 bodyguards and a future you never dared to imagine.